welcome to this week's video on the portrait and the figure. This week we're going to advance that first stage that we did in week 1. You will start with the same exercise as what we did in week 1, and I want you to try and maintain that procedure of observation and decision making from a distance and comparison between the subject matter and what you're doing on the canvas or paper. But this time we're going to then push it that little bit further and introduce into that dark mass and into that lighter mass further tonal masses. That dark mass will introduce a further darker mass and break it now up into 2 masses. And the lighter mass will introduce a slightly lighter mass into that and breaking that up into the 2 masses. You can work with the photographs that I've sent you in week 1 of Florence. Alternatively, if you feel comfortable, I would encourage you maybe, and if you've understood how to set up to do a self-portrait with this process, in that having the mirror closer to you than the easel and you walking past the mirror up to the canvas or the piece of paper, and that then when you're standing back you can see yourself and the canvas or piece of paper side by side. If you understand that process, by all means have a go perhaps this week as using yourself as the subject matter. This week you might also start to use the Zorn palette that we have done in last week's video. By all means continue to use black and white if you're just comfortable doing that, but if you want to break out a little bit, this is the first opportunity to maybe try and do that. And I'll now explain a little bit how I'd like you to go about using the Zorn palette and thinking about the Zorn palette in terms of tone. If you're going to do the exercise using colour, be concentrating on the colours here in the lower 6 rows of the chart that we did last week, and try and just choose one of the columns to follow through with, so that you're using that one colour in its different tones. It's a good idea to get into this habit rather than jumping from here to here to here to here to here, so that you're following through with a concept of colour continuity, particularly when you're working from the dark to the light side of the face in the initial massing of the light and dark masses, so that there is a connection, a unity between the 2 sides of the face. If you're using too many different colours or vastly different one to the other, you're breaking down or hindering the unity and the harmony that will keep the portrait and the figure together. So be thinking, and it doesn't matter really which one you use, any of them are worth trying. You may find with some of them, particularly in the dark ends of the scale here, that's not maybe quite dark enough that you need to go, and if you do need to go just that little bit darker, probably the easiest way is just to be adding in a little bit of blue, in this case the ivory black. But in terms of your process and how you're going to work with this one, if you do work in colour, and this is the same as if you work in black and white too, is don't just use black to do the initial massing or the darkest colour that you've got mixed up, and don't just use your lightest colour as your starting point. what you want to do is come back to a darker tone. So I'm going to mix up one of those like that. And add just a little bit of white, just to begin to open that up. And there's probably something, and there you can see when we paint that down onto the white paper, that is still relatively dark. So there would be something that I would be using to describe the dark masses to begin with, like we've done in week 1. And then I would be making up another pool. Now you want a difference between these, but not an enormous difference for this first step this time round. And there would be probably something, there we go, yes, more than appropriate to mass the light masses. Like that. So there would be a tone for, or what we'd use for the dark mass, and then something that we'd use for the light mass. It's not the darkest that I can go, and it's not the lightest that I can go. We'll then add in, so that we've got then our final then there is our dark, which I've added no white into it. And our light, which I've just added a lot more white to our colours. I still have things that I can go a little bit further if need be, particularly if I want to go and add in any highlights, because that's them there. Or any dark accents. That one there. So just to recap again, dark that you do your initial stage, like what we did in week 1, you will not use something completely black. You will mix something that's a lighter dark, if that makes sense. And you will use that to describe the dark shapes that you can see, thinking from a distance. So the same process, standing back from a distance. And to mass the light shapes, so the light of the chiaroscuro, you will use a dark light, if that makes sense, and use that to mass the light shapes. So it'll be exactly the same exercise as what you did in week 1, using those sort of 2 tones there. You'll then see in the video that I introduce, and I work initially by introducing anywhere that I can see within this that is then lighter, and introducing this, and that I look for anywhere in there that is darker and introduce that. You'll also notice at the end of the video that I add in a few highlights and a few dark accents as well. This process is exactly the same if you're using just black and white too, is that I would be aiming to start the dark mass, could be a little bit lighter. With something like that, and describing the dark mass. And this would be the same even if you're working in pencil too, or charcoal, or any of those other mediums. And then describe the light mass with a tone like that. Then there's the dark. In black and white. And we may as well just go straight to the dark since I've got that on my brush. The light mass. And the highlight. If you're going to do this exercise in watercolour, you can actually be following with a similar procedure. rather than massing this first and then going to here, I would mass the shapes with this lighter one first, moving to this one, lifting these out, and then adding back into this medium, this darker colour here, before either applying the highlights by scratching out and then applying those dark accents where needed with almost the pure black. So it's just that slight variation of the process than if you're doing it in pencil, oil, or acrylic, or charcoal. Here you can see me begin the portrait as I have done in week 1, massing the darks and then introducing a lighter tone to mass those lighter shapes, adjusting them until I'm satisfied that they are as I see them. I've now introduced those lighter tones into the dark and now introducing the darker tones into the dark and separating them and creating a greater sense of form. So there you go. Good luck, as always. If you have any questions about the approach here, feel free to send me an email. And have fun and enjoy. Give yourself time. This probably took me about an hour and a half to do this exercise. Probably, as I've said to you in other videos and possibly in Zoom, is try and paint it in sessions, so 20 to 25 minutes, then have a break, walk away from it, again another 20 to 25 minutes, and then walk away from it, just to keep your visual memory fresh and your eyes not to be too tired. Until next time, take care.